Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is MP Woodward, author of the new novel, Dead Drop. MP, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Jeff, great to be back. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, if someone listening hasn't yet heard about your new novel, Dead Drop, how would you describe the novel?
I think this is a ripped from the headlines type of thriller. It focuses on Iran and the nuclear issue. And in this novel, which picks up from the last book called The Handler, in Dead Drop, we have a situation where the Iranians have broken out, so to speak, meaning that they now have nuclear capability. And there's a debate within the American political circles about how to deal with that. And the thought is to move forward with a new type of containment deal. But all of that gets ruined when the Israelis recover an unexploded missile under the sea via a submarine. And then what happens in the book is a competition effectively between Mossad operatives and American operatives with differing goals.
Do you remember the original idea or impetus that led you to write Dead Drop?
Yeah, I sure do. So when I was a naval intelligence officer, I spent a lot of time on the Iranian problem, and so I'm pretty familiar with Iran and the way that we look at things and think about things. And many books deal with trying to keep Iran from getting to be more of a threat or containing Iranian terrorism threats and those kinds of things. But I hadn't yet read one where they actually have broken out and do have nuclear capability. And if you read about, the thought leaders within the American administration and allied administration about how to deal with that, there are very differing points of view. The Israelis, of course, take a really aggressive stance towards that because they see that as an existential threat. I think there are those within American thought circles that think that, well, this is not unlike North Korea, and it's an issue of containment. And the thing that I wanted to exploit was to kind of present those debates and dramatize them, but also to bring in a few twists that do couple this with Hezbollah in Lebanon as effectively an Iranian proxy government. And that's sort of the twist that rarely gets talked about. And so I started thinking about it a little over a year ago as we were hearing more and more about Iranian nuclear development.
Well, as you mentioned, this is a novel that's ripped from the headlines. What type of research did you do as you were working on the novel?
A couple things. I spoke to a number of people, both within the U.S. defense establishment, former intelligence officials, people that I knew from my former life. But then I also had the opportunity to meet a number of Israelis and get their point of view, including some people who had worked in Mossad and spoke to me on condition of anonymity. I spoke to a number of Lebanese people to really get a flavor for how they look at Hezbollah. So there were those in-person interviews, and then of course there's a lot of books written on the subject. We've effectively had a shadow war going with Iran for the last 20, 30 years, all the way back to the Reagan administration when a CIA station chief in Beirut was killed by Hezbollah, and when we lost 283 Marines in the early 80s in Beirut, again attributed to Hezbollah, who was backed by Iran. And ever since, things have not been cozy between the two governments. So there's plenty of literature out there to catch up on those kinds of things.
And were there any specific writing challenges that you encountered as you were working on Dead Drop? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think there are always challenges in writing a novel. It's a complex beast, and my process, at least, is to have the plot figured out, have the ironic twist figured out of an ending, and to have something of an idea of what gets it going, and then to fill in the blanks in between at a high level, and then write in the details. For me, one of the bigger challenges this time was probably to learn a lot about the tactics of Mossad. So I tried very hard in this novel to go deeper than just the word Mossad, which is Hebrew for the Institute, and to get really into Mossad's organization and the way that they do things. So I spent a great deal of time to do that. I should say, to overcome that obstacle. I spent a great deal of time researching Mossad, as I mentioned, speaking to some people, but also reading some books about their past exploits to make sure that I really understood how the organization functions and the unique capabilities that it has and the ways that it might react in the situations that I was presenting.
And I know that you worked as an executive for Amazon Prime Video. When you're thinking about a novel, do you think cinematically when you're thinking about a scene?
I do. And I think the way that I would put that is that one of the larger challenges that any novelist has, particularly a geopolitical novel, is presenting multiple points of view as the conflict is rising and as tension is rising and as stakes are growing. And the reason that that's challenging is because this issue of pace comes along, right? So there needs to the pace needs to feel natural within the book. It needs to feel realistic. There's often, I think, a temptation by writers to have things happen almost simultaneously, which is, I think, unrealistic. And so for pacing, I studied the way video does it. And in my time at Prime Video, I had the opportunity to meet a number of directors and producers and writers. And I sort of asked about those questions and then really observed. And if you look at a video, whether it's, sort of a 6-series or a 6-episode anthology or a movie, in either case, there's a story arc that's presented in a pretty short period of time. And a lot of times in that short period of episodic time, there has to be this rising tension that's taking place over weeks or months. And so I started looking very carefully at the way screenwriters deal with pacing and some of the tricks that they use. And so I started to imitate that a little bit, I would say, in a literary sense, and think about it more as if it were a screenplay than a novel. Of course, you have a lot more leeway in a novel to get inside characters' heads than you do for a screenplay, for example. But the basic framework of a story arc in a compressed period of time is similar.
Sure. Well, given the topic of your new novel, and as you've talked about the research that you did do for it, what are your thoughts kind of on a personal level about a nuclear capable Iran at some point in the future?
I worry about it in the strategic sense in two ways. I think in one way there's the doomsday scenario where the Iranian nuclear capability slips out to fundamentalists, people burning with Islamic fervor, the 9/11 type of incident. And there are some arguments that would say that is the chief problem with Iran. They are a state sponsor of terror through Hezbollah, which is itself an army and proxy government functioning within Lebanon, effectively a country within a country. And in the book, in Dead Drop, I really present that. Like, okay, yes, Iran's got nukes, and on one level, they're a country that's gone to Geneva and they've negotiated a deal, and who knows, maybe we can trust them. On the other, they have this army, this ungoverned army in Lebanon called Hezbollah, which has sworn for the destruction of Israel. So I worry about them on that sense, but I also worry about Iranian nuclear capability in the larger strategic sense around what's happening globally. Right now, I think the chief strategic problem that the world has is in Taiwan and the Taiwan Straits and the Pacific Theater. And we don't, the United States doesn't have unlimited resources to be able to cover all these threats simultaneously. So we see a battle raging in Ukraine that we're trying to support and proxy through the Ukrainians. We have this rising threat of Taiwan, and defense thinkers will tell you that the best offense there is a very credible deterrent. So that means tying troops down there. There are still troops in Korea to tie Korea down. So if all of a sudden this new deterrent theater opens up in the Persian Gulf, I think it puts a massive strain on American military resources as they exist today. And a nuclear capable Iran would really change that calculus.
Sure. Well, what writing advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories or novels?
Oh, gosh. One is persistence. I think you just have to sit there and grind it out. And as you do, you get better over time. You can't help it. You will act as your own editor, and you just have to keep pressing forward, and really write every day. I feel like it's a muscle that has to be exercised. And for me anyway, I definitely know when I'm kind of in the zone or have a lot of momentum going. Whereas then if I take, a month off from it, it feels a lot rustier, a lot harder to get going. So I think the number one thing is probably persistence and consistency. And then the second thing I'd say is that I don't think, people often ask that question, are you a plotter or a pantser, meaning a seat of the pants person, and, make it up as you go? I really don't think anybody can be a pantser. I think you have to know where you're going, at least in this genre, because otherwise you will paint yourself into corners and have a lot of difficulty getting out of them. So I like the idea of a master plan as a guiding framework.
Well, what books have you read recently that you enjoyed, either fiction or nonfiction?
Oh gosh, on the fiction side, I just finished Ken Follett's Never, which was one of the things I have always admired about Ken Follett. And he's had a long career, and I'm super happy to see him still writing thrillers. But one of the things that he's always done well is characterization and boiling, national interests or big geopolitical interests and events down to individual persons, whether hero or villain. And in this book, Never, it envisions, effectively a war that begins over North Korea that drags China and the United States in, and that is a very ambitious thing to do. And the way that he did it, I thought was really cool. On the nonfiction side, I'm a big fan of biographies, and I just finished one on U.S. Grant, but before that, there's a 3-volume on Winston Churchill that I just finished, and I'll probably start hunting around for a new biography here pretty soon, just because I find them inspiring.
Well, where can people find you online if they'd like to learn more about you and your new novel?
Oh, you bet. mpwoodward.com is my website, mpwoodward.com. And on there, I keep info up going on the books, but I also write a blog there on the story behind the story with events in the news.
That's great. Well, again, we've been speaking with MP Woodward, author of the new novel, Dead Drop. The novel is available now, so go buy a copy. And MP, thanks for doing this interview.
You bet, Jeff. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.